The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William walked down the familiar corridor toward his private study. His footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floor, creating a rhythmic sound that had become second nature to him over the years. He had just returned from an early morning meeting with palace advisors about upcoming royal engagements, his mind still buzzing with details about charity events and official visits. As he approached his study door, William noticed something unusual. The heavy oak door, which he was certain he had locked the previous evening, stood slightly ajar. A thin sliver of morning light escaped from the gap, casting a narrow beam across the hallway carpet. His brow furrowed with confusion and a touch of concern. Palace security was always meticulous, and unauthorized access to private royal quarters was virtually impossible. William paused for a moment, listening carefully for any sounds coming from within the room. The palace was typically quiet at this hour, with most staff members busy with their morning duties in other parts of the building. He could hear the distant sounds of gardeners working on the palace grounds and the occasional footstep from servants moving through the corridors below, but nothing from his study. Pushing the door open slowly, William stepped into the room that had served as his personal sanctuary for years. The familiar scent of leather-bound books and polished wood greeted him, along with something else, the faint fragrance of Kate's perfume lingering in the air. His eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in every detail with the practiced awareness that came from years of public life and security training. Everything appeared to be in its usual place at first glance. His mahogany desk sat positioned perfectly beneath the large window overlooking the palace gardens. The leather chair where he spent countless hours reviewing documents and making important phone calls remained in its proper position. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with volumes on history, politics, and personal interests that few people knew about. But as William's gaze swept across the room more carefully, he began to notice subtle signs that someone had been there. A pen lay on his desk in a different position than he remembered. One of the desk drawers was not quite flush with the others, suggesting it had been opened and hastily closed. Most telling of all, a small stack of personal correspondence that he kept in a locked drawer had been placed on top of the desk. His heart began to beat faster as he approached the desk. These were not ordinary letters or official documents. They were deeply personal communications, some dating back to his university days, others more recent. Letters from friends who had shared their most private thoughts with him, trusting in his discretion, messages from family members discussing sensitive matters that were never meant for public consumption, and most concerning of all, several letters that contained information that could be damaging if they fell into the wrong hands. William's trained eye immediately recognized that the letters had been photographed or copied. They were arranged too neatly, positioned as if someone had carefully documented each page before attempting to return them to their original location. Tiny impressions on some of the papers suggested they had been pressed flat against a surface while being photographed. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Someone had systematically gone through his most private possessions. As he stood there processing this violation of his privacy, William heard a soft sound from the adjoining sitting room. It was barely audible, perhaps the rustle of fabric or the quiet scrape of a shoe against the carpet. His muscles tensed instinctively, and he moved silently toward the connecting door between the two rooms. Years of military training kicked in automatically, making his movements fluid and purposeful, despite the emotional turmoil building inside him. The sitting room was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn across the windows. As his eyes adjusted to the lower light, William could make out a figure seated in one of the upholstered chairs facing away from him. The person appeared to be completely still, as if frozen in place or perhaps unaware of his presence. The familiar silhouette and the cascade of brown hair immediately told him who it was, even before he could see her face. "Kate?" he called softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond or turn around. William moved closer, his concern growing with each step. Something was terribly wrong with this entire situation. Kate would never go through his private papers without asking, and she certainly wouldn't ignore him when he spoke to her. As he circled around to the front of the chair, what he saw made his breath catch in his throat and his heart skip several beats. Kate sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead with an expression of complete shock on her face. Her usually bright eyes were wide and filled with unshed tears that caught what little light filtered through the curtains. Her hands rested motionless, in her lap, clutching what appeared to be a photograph and a handwritten letter. Her face had lost all color, making her appear almost ghost-like in the dim light. "Kate, what's wrong? What happened here?" William asked urgently, dropping to one knee beside her chair. But Kate remained silent, her gaze fixed on some distant point that only she could see. The tears that had been threatening to fall finally began to slip down her cheeks, leaving glistening tracks on her pale skin. Whatever she had discovered in his study had clearly shaken her to her very core, leaving her unable to speak or even acknowledge his presence. William realized that this moment would change everything between them, though he still had no idea what she had found or how devastating the truth would prove to be. William's hands shook slightly as he reached toward Kate, desperate to understand what had caused such a dramatic reaction. Her silence was more frightening than any words could have been. In all their years together, through public scrutiny, family pressures, and the countless challenges of royal life, he had never seen her like this, completely withdrawn and seemingly shattered. "Please, Kate, talk to me," William pleaded, his voice breaking with emotion. "Whatever this is, we can work through it together." Slowly, as if moving through water, Kate turned her head to look at him. The pain in her eyes was so raw and immediate that William felt it like a physical blow to his chest. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she simply extended her trembling hand toward him, offering the photograph and letter she had been clutching. William took the items with reluctance, sensing that whatever they contained would fundamentally alter his world. The photograph was old, slightly faded, and had obviously been kept hidden for many years. As his eyes focused on the image, his own face grew pale and his hands began to tremble just as Kate's had. The photograph showed a younger version of himself, probably from his early 20s, standing close to a young woman with flowing blonde hair and striking green eyes. But this wasn't just any casual photograph. It captured an intimate moment between them. William's arm was wrapped protectively around the woman's waist, and both of them were laughing with the kind of uninhibited joy that spoke of deep affection and complete comfort with each other. They were standing in front of what appeared to be a small cottage, surrounded by blooming gardens and countryside that looked distinctly English. What made the photograph even more shocking was the woman's appearance. She bore a striking resemblance to someone William recognized from old family photographs, someone who had died years before he met Kate. The woman in the picture looked remarkably similar to his mother, Princess Diana, but this was clearly someone else entirely, someone he had obviously cared about deeply, someone who had been significant enough in his life that he had kept this photograph hidden away like a treasured secret. With growing dread, William turned his attention to the letter that accompanied the photograph. The handwriting was feminine and elegant, written in blue ink that had faded slightly with age. The date at the top showed it was written nearly 15 years ago, during a period of his life that he had rarely discussed with Kate or anyone else. "My dearest William," the letter began, "I know our time together must come to an end soon. The world you belong to and the world I come from are too different, and I understand that your duty must come first. But I want you to know that these past 2 years have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me what true love feels like, and no matter what happens, I will carry that with me always." William's hands were shaking so badly now that he could barely continue reading, but the words seemed to burn themselves into his consciousness. The letter continued with intimate details about their relationship, places they had visited together, private jokes they had shared, and dreams they had discussed for a future that could never be. It was clear from every line that this had been a deeply meaningful relationship, not a casual romance or brief infatuation. "I know you will find someone who can give you the life you deserve, someone who can stand beside you in public and share your royal duties." The letter went on. "I pray that she will make you as happy as you have made me. Please know that I will never speak of our time together to anyone. Your secret is safe with me always. I love you enough to let you go. Forever yours, Sarah." The letter concluded with a postscript that made William's blood run cold. "I've enclosed something that I hope will help you remember our time together with joy rather than sadness. The cottage will always be ours in my memory, even if we can never return there together." William looked up from the letter to find Kate watching his face intently, reading every expression and emotion as he processed what he had just discovered. Her tears had stopped, but the pain in her eyes had only deepened. She had been watching him relive memories of a relationship that he had never told her about, seeing him react to reminders of a love that had clearly meant a great deal to him. "How long were you with her?" Kate finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper and hoarse from crying. William set the photograph and letter down on the small table beside her chair, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to explain something he had buried so deeply that he had almost convinced himself it never happened. The truth was complicated, painful, and something he had never intended for Kate to discover. 2 years, he admitted quietly, unable to meet her eyes. "It was during the period when I was questioning everything about my role, about what kind of future I wanted. She was everything that my life wasn't supposed to include." Kate absorbed this information in silence, each word seeming to cause her physical pain. She had always known that William had relationships before they got serious, but discovering evidence of something this significant, something he had hidden so completely, felt like a betrayal that cut to her very soul. "Where is she now?" Kate asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. William was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a sadness that Kate had never heard before. "She died, Kate, about 6 months before you and I started dating seriously. Cancer, she was only 25. The room fell into absolute silence. Kate felt as though all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Everything suddenly made sense. William's occasional distant moods during their early relationship, his reluctance to discuss certain periods of his past, the way he sometimes seemed to be carrying a weight that he couldn't share with her. He hadn't just been hiding a past relationship. He had been grieving the loss of someone he had loved deeply, someone who had died just as their own relationship was beginning to flourish. "Did you love her more than you love me?" The question escaped Kate's lips before she could stop herself, and she immediately regretted asking it. But now that the words were out there, she couldn't take them back. She watched William's face crumble as he realized the full extent of the pain his secret had caused her, and she knew that whatever his answer was, nothing between them would ever be quite the same again. William's face went through a series of emotions: pain, regret, love, and something that looked almost like relief. For years, he had carried the weight of this secret alone, never knowing how to tell Kate about Sarah without making her feel like she was competing with a ghost. Now that the truth was out, he realized how much damage his silence had caused. "Kate, please understand," William began, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't keep this from you to hurt you. I kept it from you because I was terrified of losing you. She was my first real love, yes, but you have to understand the context of who I was then." Kate remained silent, but she was listening intently, her eyes never leaving his face as he struggled to find the right words. "I was 22 when I met her," William continued, settling onto the floor beside Kate's chair so they could be at eye level. "I was angry, rebellious, and desperately trying to figure out how to live a normal life while being anything but normal. Sarah worked at a small bookshop in a village near Sandringham. She had no idea who I was when we first met. I was just another customer looking for books about military history." The memory seemed to transport William back to that time, and Kate could see the young man he had been reflected in his eyes. "For the first time in my life, I could just be William. Not Prince William, not the future king, just a regular person who happened to be interested in the same book she was. We would spend hours talking about literature, about travel, about dreams that had nothing to do with duty or royal obligations." Kate felt a stab of jealousy, mixed with sadness. She had fallen in love with William the Prince with all the complications that came with his position. Sarah had fallen in love with just William the man, something Kate had never been able to experience. "The cottage in the photograph," William continued, "belonged to her grandmother. It was this tiny place in the Cotswolds, completely private, surrounded by fields and gardens. When I was there with Sarah, I could pretend I was just a normal person with a normal life. We would cook dinner together, read books by the fireplace, take long walks without security teams or photographers following us." Kate's heart ached as she imagined William experiencing that kind of freedom, that kind of normal relationship that she knew they could never have. Even their most private moments were overshadowed by the knowledge that they were public figures, that their every move was of interest to the world. "But it couldn't last," William said, his voice becoming heavy with old grief. As I got older and my royal duties increased, it became impossible to maintain the fiction that I could have a normal life. Sarah understood before I did that we were living in a fantasy. She was the one who ended it, actually. She said she loved me too much to watch me sacrifice my duty for her, and she was too proud to become a royal secret that had to be hidden away. Kate found herself crying again, but this time it wasn't just for herself. She was crying for William, for Sarah, and for the impossible situation they had all found themselves in. Love within the royal family was never simple, never just about two people and their feelings for each other. After we broke up, I threw myself into my military service, William explained. I convinced myself that I had made the right choice, that duty had to come first. I barely thought about personal relationships for months, and then Sarah got sick. William paused, his voice breaking slightly. She called me when she was diagnosed. Not to ask for anything, just to tell me. She said she didn't want me to hear about it from someone else and wonder if there was anything I could have done. By the time I found out how serious it was, she was already in the final stages. Kate reached out and took William's hand, her anger momentarily forgotten in the face of his obvious pain. Did you see her before she died? William nodded, tears now flowing freely down his face. I visited her in the hospital just once. She looked so small and fragile, nothing like the vibrant woman I had known. She made me promise that I wouldn't let guilt about our relationship stop me from finding love again. She said she wanted me to be happy, to find someone who could share my public life the way she never could. The irony wasn't lost on Kate. Sarah had essentially given William permission to love someone else, and that someone had turned out to be her. But instead of feeling grateful, Kate felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude, jealousy, sadness, and a strange sense of connection to a woman she had never met, but who had shaped William's capacity for love. The photograph and letter, Kate said quietly. How did they end up in your study? I found them in a box with other personal items hidden in the back of your filing cabinet. William looked confused. I don't understand. I keep those things in a safety deposit box at the bank. I only look at them once a year, on the anniversary of her death. They shouldn't have been here at all. A chill ran down Kate's spine as she realized the implications of what William was saying. If he hadn't brought the photograph and letter to his study, then someone else had. Someone had access to his most private possessions and had deliberately placed them where Kate would find them. This wasn't an accidental discovery. It was a calculated move by someone who wanted to cause problems in their marriage. William, Kate said urgently, someone wanted me to find these. Someone knows about Sarah and is using your relationship with her to try to hurt us. William's expression shifted from grief to anger as he understood what Kate was suggesting. Someone broke into the bank? That's impossible. The security there is... He trailed off as another possibility occurred to him. Unless someone I trusted had access to the box. They sat in stunned silence as the full scope of the situation became clear. Not only were they dealing with the emotional aftermath of Kate's discovery, but they were also facing the realization that someone close to them, someone they had trusted, was actively working to undermine their marriage. The photograph and letter weren't just painful reminders of the past. They were weapons being used against them in the present. Kate felt a surge of determination replace her hurt and anger. Whatever problems she and William needed to work through regarding Sarah and his past, they would have to wait. Right now, they had a more immediate threat to deal with. Someone who was willing to violate their privacy and manipulate their emotions for unknown purposes. We need to find out who did this, Kate said firmly, her voice stronger than it had been since William found her in the chair. And we need to find out what they want. William immediately reached for his secure phone, his military training taking over as he shifted into crisis management mode. The emotional conversation about Sarah would have to... Wait, they were potentially dealing with a serious security breach that could have far-reaching consequences for the entire royal family. I'm calling Henderson from Palace Security, William said, his voice now steady and authoritative. We need to know exactly who had access to that safety deposit box and when it was last opened. Kate stood up from the chair, her own sense of purpose returning as she processed the gravity of their situation. Wait, she said, placing a hand on William's arm before he could dial. We need to think about this carefully. If we involve security right away, this could become a major scandal. Someone clearly wants to cause problems for us, and if news of this investigation leaks, it could be exactly what they're hoping for. William paused, recognizing the wisdom in Kate's words. Palace scandals had a way of taking on a life of their own, often causing more damage than the original incident. They needed to be strategic about how they handled this situation. "You're right," William agreed, setting down his phone. "But we can't just ignore this either. Someone violated our privacy and could be planning to do worse. We need information, but we need to get it quietly." Kate moved to William's desk and picked up the photograph again, studying it more carefully. "Look at this picture, William. Really look at it. Does anything seem off to you?" William joined her at the desk, examining the photograph with fresh eyes. "What do you mean?" "The quality, the way it's aged, the paper it's printed on," Kate explained, her analytical mind working through the details. "I've seen plenty of photographs from that time period, and something about this one doesn't look quite right. The colors are too vibrant for a 15-year-old photo, and the paper feels different." William leaned in closer, his own suspicions beginning to form. Kate was right. While the image itself looked authentic, there were subtle technical aspects that seemed inconsistent with a photograph taken in the early 2000s. "You think it might be doctored?" William asked. Though even as he said it, he knew that his memories of Sarah and their relationship were real, regardless of whether this particular photograph was genuine. "I think we need to have it analyzed," Kate replied, discreetly, by someone we trust completely. "If someone is manufacturing evidence to use against us, we need to know the full extent of what we're dealing with." William nodded, his mind racing through their options. "Marcus," he said suddenly. "Marcus Thompson from our university days. He's a forensic analyst now. Works with the Metropolitan Police on high-profile cases. If anyone could tell us whether this photograph has been manipulated, it would be him." Kate remembered Marcus, a quiet, brilliant student who had been part of their social circle at St. Andrews. He had always been discreet and trustworthy, even during their wild university days when everyone was young and sometimes reckless. "Can we trust him to keep this quiet?" Kate asked. "Absolutely," William replied without hesitation. "He's been dealing with sensitive cases for years, and he's never broken confidence with us. Plus, he owes me a favor from when I helped him through his divorce proceedings a few years back." While William made arrangements to meet with Marcus discreetly, Kate continued examining the other items that had been left on the desk. The letter, unlike the photograph, felt authentic in every detail. The handwriting, the paper, the way the ink had faded, everything about it seemed genuine. More importantly, the emotional content matched what William had told her about his relationship with Sarah. But as Kate read through the letter again, something caught her attention that she had missed during her initial emotional reaction. In the margins of the second page, there were faint pencil marks, almost invisible unless you were looking for them. They appeared to be notations or symbols, possibly made by someone who had studied the letter carefully. "William," Kate called softly, not wanting to alarm him while he was still on the phone with Marcus. When he looked over, she pointed to the markings. "Did Sarah ever make notes like this on her letters?" William finished his call and came over to examine what Kate had discovered. "No, never. Sarah was very careful about her handwriting and presentation. She would never have marked up a letter like this, especially not one that was meant to be kept as a memento." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. So someone else has been studying this letter, making notes about its contents. But why? Before William could answer, they were interrupted by a soft knock on the study door. William quickly gathered the photograph and letter, tucking them into his jacket pocket as Kate composed herself and smoothed down her hair. "Come in," William called, hoping his voice sounded normal. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Patterson, one of the palace's senior housekeeping staff members. She was a woman in her 60s who had worked for the royal family for over 30 years and was known for her discretion and loyalty. "Your Royal Highnesses," she said with a small curtsy, "I apologize for disturbing you, but there's been an incident that I thought you should know about immediately." William and Kate exchanged glances, both wondering if this incident was related to their current situation. "What kind of incident, Mrs. Patterson?" William asked. "Earlier this morning, before you arrived, sir, we discovered that someone had attempted to access the private quarters. The security cameras in the corridor show an unidentified person near your study around 3 a.m. The image isn't clear enough to make a positive identification, but it's definitely someone who doesn't belong in this section of the palace." Kate felt her knees go weak. Not only had someone planted evidence in William's study, but they had actually been caught on camera doing it. This was no longer just about their marriage or even about privacy. This was a serious security breach that could have implications for the entire royal family's safety. "Has this been reported to the police?" Kate asked. "That's just it, Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Patterson replied, looking uncomfortable. "When we tried to review the full security footage from last night, we discovered that several key cameras had malfunctioned. The only reason we have any footage at all is because of a backup system that most people don't know about. It appears that someone with detailed knowledge of palace security systems orchestrated this break-in." William's expression grew grim as he realized they were dealing with far more than a simple breach of privacy. This was a sophisticated operation, carried out by someone with inside knowledge and significant resources. The question was no longer just who had done this, but why, and what they planned to do next. "Mrs. Patterson," William said carefully, "I need you to keep this information strictly confidential for now. Don't discuss it with anyone else on the staff, and don't file any official reports until I give you permission. Can you do that for me?" "Of course, sir," Mrs. Patterson replied, though her expression showed that she understood the gravity of what she was being asked to keep quiet. After she left, William and Kate stood in silence, both realizing that their quiet morning had turned into something that could potentially threaten everything they had built together, not just their marriage, but their entire way of life. 2 days later, William met Marcus Thompson at a small, discreet cafe in South London, far from the usual haunts of royal watchers and paparazzi. Marcus had aged well since their university days, his dark hair now touched with gray at the temples, but his sharp, analytical mind remained unchanged. He carried a brown leather briefcase and wore the kind of unremarkable business attire that helped him blend into any crowd. "You look terrible, mate," Marcus said quietly as he sat down across from William in a corner booth. "Whatever this is about, it's really gotten to you, hasn't it?" William managed a weak smile. Throughout their friendship, Marcus had never been one to mince words or treat him differently because of his royal status. It was one of the things William had always valued about their relationship. "It's complicated," William replied, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "I need you to analyze these items, but I also need your absolute discretion. This could affect Kate and me, but it could also impact the entire royal family if it gets out." Marcus opened the envelope carefully, his expression growing serious as he examined the photograph and letter. His trained eye immediately began cataloging details that most people would miss: paper quality, ink composition, printing techniques, and aging patterns. "Give me your initial impression," William said, "just based on what you can see right now." Marcus studied the items for several more minutes, occasionally pulling out a small magnifying glass from his briefcase. "The letter appears authentic. The paper, ink, and aging all seem consistent with something written 15 years ago. But the photograph—" He paused, examining it under the magnifying glass. "This is more interesting." "Interesting how?" William asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "The image itself appears to be genuine. It's definitely you in the photo, and the woman appears to be real as well, not digitally inserted. But the photograph has been reprinted recently, probably within the last month or two. The original image might be 15 years old, but this physical print is new." William felt a mixture of relief and confusion. If the image was real but the print was new, it meant that someone had access to the original photograph and had deliberately created a fresh copy to plant in his study. "So someone has the original?" William asked. "That would be my assessment," Marcus replied. "The question is how they got it." "Do you still have the original of this photograph?" William shook his head. "I thought Sarah had the only copies. When she died, her family might have gone through her belongings, but I can't imagine how anyone else would have gotten hold of something this personal." Marcus made some notes in a small notebook. "I'll need a few days to do a complete analysis, but I can tell you right now that whoever did this has access to professional-grade photographic equipment and knows what they're doing. This isn't some amateur operation." William left the cafe with more questions than answers, but at least he now had confirmation that someone was deliberately manipulating the situation. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave him time to think about who might have both the resources and the motivation to orchestrate such an elaborate scheme. Meanwhile, Kate had spent the morning doing her own investigation. Using her connections from her pre-royal days, she had quietly reached out to several journalists and media contacts, trying to get a sense of whether anyone was working on stories related to William's past relationships. What she discovered was both illuminating and disturbing. 3 different reporters have been asking questions about William's romantic history from his 20s. Kate explained when William returned to the palace. They're all being very circumspect about it, but they're specifically asking about relationships that were kept secret from the public. William sat down heavily in his desk chair. Someone is shopping a story. But why now? We've been married for years, our relationship is stable, and we're more popular with the public than we've ever been. What would anyone gain from dredging up ancient history? Kate had been thinking about this same question all morning. What if it's not about us directly? What if we're collateral damage in someone else's agenda? What do you mean? Kate pulled out her laptop and showed William a series of news articles she had been researching. Look at the timing of all this. The break-in happened just 2 days before the announcement about the new succession reforms. The ones that would change how the monarchy handles certain types of scandals and privacy issues. William studied the articles, beginning to see the connection Kate was making. The proposed reforms would give the royal family more protection from media intrusion and would change how certain types of personal information could be used against them. If someone opposed these reforms, creating a scandal that highlighted the need for such protections could be a way of deriving public support. You think someone is trying to create a crisis to influence political decisions? William asked. It would explain the sophistication of the operation, Kate replied. This isn't just about hurting us personally. It's about using our situation to make a larger point about royal privacy and media access. Their conversation was interrupted by William's secure phone ringing. The caller ID showed that it was Marcus, calling much sooner than expected. William, Marcus said without preamble, you need to see something. I've found additional evidence that changes everything. Can you meet me at my lab tonight? And bring Kate, she should see this too. An hour after sunset, William and Kate found themselves in Marcus's forensic laboratory, a sterile, high-tech facility that looked more like something from a science fiction movie than a typical office building. Marcus led them to a workstation equipped with various analytical instruments and computer monitors. I fast-tracked the analysis because something felt wrong about the whole situation, Marcus explained. And I was right to be suspicious. Look at this. He pulled up a high-resolution scan of the photograph on one of the monitors. When I examined the image under ultraviolet light, I found something that isn't visible to the naked eye. The UV scan revealed faint markings along the edges of the photograph, numbers, and letters that appeared to be some kind of identification code. This is a processing code used by a specific type of professional printing equipment, Marcus explained. I was able to trace it back to its source. The photograph was printed at a facility that specializes in creating evidence for legal proceedings, the kind of place that lawyers and private investigators use when they need high-quality reproductions of documents. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. Someone hired professionals to create this reproduction. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was planned well in advance. That's not all, Marcus continued, pulling up another screen. I also found traces of a specific type of adhesive on the letter, the kind used to temporarily attach documents to surfaces for photographing. Someone didn't just study this letter. They documented it extensively, probably creating a complete digital archive. William stared at the evidence, trying to process the implications. So not only does someone have copies of these items, but they've probably shared them with others. Legal professionals, investigators, maybe even journalists. I'm afraid it gets worse, Marcus said quietly. The adhesive traces suggest that this letter has been handled multiple times over several months. Someone has been planning this operation for a very long time, probably studying your routines, your security procedures, and your personal relationships. Kate sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the realization that their private lives had been under surveillance for months without their knowledge. How many other secrets do they have access to? What else are they planning to use against us? As if in response to her question, William's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. The photograph was just the beginning. If you want to protect your family's reputation, you'll do exactly as we say. Instructions will follow. The 3 of them stared at the message in stunned silence, realizing that they were no longer dealing with a simple privacy breach or even a sophisticated blackmail scheme. They were facing an organized campaign that had been months in the making, and whoever was behind it was just getting started. The next morning brought another anonymous message, this time with specific demands. The blackmailers wanted William to publicly oppose the succession reforms and to make statements that would undermine the modernization efforts the royal family had been working toward for years. In exchange, they promised that the Sarah photographs and any other compromising materials would remain private. Kate paced the length of their private sitting room, her mind working through possibilities and contingencies. "They're not just trying to hurt us personally," she said. "They're trying to use us as pawns in a much larger political game. Someone with serious resources and political connections is behind this." William sat at his desk, staring at the latest message on his phone. The weight of the decision they faced was crushing. If he complied with the demands, he would be betraying his own principles and potentially damaging the monarchy's progress toward greater transparency and accountability. If he refused, intimate details of his past relationship with Sarah would likely become public, along with whatever other secrets the blackmailers had uncovered. "There has to be another way," William said finally. "We can't let them win, but we also can't ignore the potential damage to our family and the institution." Kate stopped pacing and turned to face him. "What if we take control of the narrative ourselves? What if we tell the truth about Sarah before they can use it against us?" William looked up sharply. "You mean go public with everything?" "Think about it," Kate said, her voice gaining strength as she developed the idea. "The power they have over us comes from the assumption that we'll do anything to keep this secret. But what if it's not actually as damaging as they think it is? What if the public would understand and even sympathize with the situation?" William considered this possibility. In recent years, the public had become more accepting of the royal family's humanity and personal struggles. The rigid expectations of previous generations had given way to a more nuanced understanding of the pressures and challenges that came with royal life. The relationship with Sarah happened before we were together, Kate continued. You were young, you were questioning your role, and you found love with someone who couldn't be part of your public life. That's not a scandal. It's a human story that many people would relate to. Before William could respond, his secure phone rang. The caller ID showed it was his private secretary, James Morrison, someone who had been with the royal household for over 15 years and was known for his discretion and loyalty. "Sir," James said urgently when William answered, "we have a situation. I've just received calls from 3 major newspapers, all asking for comment on a story they claim to have about your personal life. They're giving us until tomorrow morning to respond before they publish." William's heart sank. The blackmailers had apparently decided not to wait for his response to their demands. What exactly are they claiming to have? Details are vague, but they're all mentioning photographs and letters from a previous relationship. "Sir, if there's anything you need to tell me to help manage this situation, now would be the time." William looked at Kate, who nodded encouragingly. "James, I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Kate and I are coming in for an emergency meeting with the communications team. We're going to get ahead of this story ourselves." 2 hours later, William and Kate sat in a conference room at Clarence's house with their most trusted advisors. The atmosphere was tense but determined as they laid out the full situation. The break-in, the blackmail attempts, and the impending media stories. "The way I see it," said Sarah Chen, their head of communications, "we have 2 choices. We can try to contain this and fight it, which will likely drag out for months and create more opportunities for our opponents to damage us. Or we can control the narrative by being proactive and honest." "What would that look like practically?" Kate asked. Sarah pulled out a draft statement she had been working on. "We acknowledge that William had a significant relationship before your marriage. We explain the circumstances, that he was young, that the relationship ended because of the incompatibility between private love and public duty, and that the woman involved died years ago. We frame it as a story about growth, sacrifice, and ultimately finding the right partner in you, Kate." William read through the draft, feeling a sense of relief as he saw his story with Sarah, presented in honest but sympathetic terms. It wasn't scandalous, it was human. "There's something else we need to address," Kate said. "The people behind this aren't going to stop with Sarah. If we don't expose their methods and their motivations, they'll just find other ways to attack us and other members of the royal family." James Morrison nodded grimly. "We've been doing our own investigation into the security breach, working with trusted contacts in law enforcement, We've identified several individuals connected to a private investigation firm that has been hired to gather information on various public figures. The firm appears to be working for clients who want to influence the succession reform debates. Do we know who's paying them? William asked. Not yet, but we're getting closer. What we do know is that this operation has been targeting several members of Parliament who support the reforms, as well as journalists who have been favorable to the monarchy's modernization efforts. You and Kate aren't the only targets. Kate felt a surge of anger at the realization that their personal pain was just one part of a broader campaign of harassment and intimidation. Then we need to expose all of it. Not just our situation, but the entire operation. The next morning, instead of waiting for the newspapers to publish their stories, William and Kate appeared together for an unprecedented live television interview. William spoke honestly about his relationship with Sarah, explaining how it had shaped his understanding of duty and sacrifice. Kate spoke about discovering the truth and how it had ultimately strengthened their marriage by removing the burden of secrets. But they didn't stop there. They also revealed the details of the break-in, the blackmail attempts, and the broader campaign of intimidation that had been targeting supporters of royal reform. They named the private investigation firm and called for a full legal investigation into their activities. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Rather than being scandalized by William's past relationship, people were moved by the honest account of young love sacrificed for duty. They were outraged by the invasion of privacy and the attempted manipulation of the royal family for political purposes. Within 48 hours, the private investigation firm was under criminal investigation, and several of their clients had been exposed as opponents of democratic reform who were willing to use illegal methods to achieve their goals. The succession reforms, rather than being derailed by scandal, gained new support from a public that admired the royal family's courage in fighting back against manipulation. Kate stood beside William on the balcony of their private apartments, watching the sunset over London. The crisis that had begun with her discovery of a photograph had transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. Not just a victory over their blackmailers, but a new level of trust and openness in their marriage. Do you think we did the right thing? William asked, his arm around Kate's waist. Kate leaned into him, feeling more secure in their relationship than she had in years. I think we finally learned that the truth, even when it's complicated and painful, is always stronger than the secrets people try to use against us. William looked down at his wife, remembering Sarah's final words to him about finding someone who could share his public life. Kate had not only shared it, she had helped him reshape it into something more honest and more human. In trying to destroy their marriage, their enemies had actually helped them build something stronger. I love you, William said simply, the words carrying more weight than they ever had before. I love you too, Kate replied. All of you, including the parts of your past that made you who you are today. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they both knew that while there would always be new challenges ahead, they would face them together, with no secrets between them, and no fear of those who would try to use their humanity against them. The photograph that had once seemed like it could destroy everything had instead become the catalyst for a stronger, more authentic life together.